Today, I want to talk about a legacy product from Line 6, and it's the Vetta. I've been a Line 6 user for over 20 years now, getting my first pod, the 2.0, back in 2002, and it was the little magic bean that could turn the clean keyboard amps at school into these like new metal fire-breathing monsters. The Vetta was first introduced by Line 6 in 2001, and at the time it was their flagship product, and the price reflected where the company believed it should sit in the market to compete against high-end amps. It was really expensive. The Vetta 2 was released in 2003, and really it was more of a facelift than anything else. Line 6 continued to support the original Vetta and even provided the same firmware updates for both models. It was pretty much the same amp. The Vetta 2 did look a lot better though, and it had a much more suitable aesthetic for competing against the more boutique offerings from other companies, in my opinion anyway. Losing the ugly Robocop style visuals was a very good choice. It seemed like it never really took off compared to the Spider and the Flexstone series, and it only really developed something of a cult following, despite, I believe, being way ahead of its time. Dual amps and double track simulation is a typical feature found on many modelers now in 2024, but back in the early 2000s it wasn't quite so common. I've been gigging and playing live non-stop since its release, and I can count on one hand the amount of times I've actually seen a guitarist using one of these on stage. But like I said, it was very expensive. I've had 3 different Vettas over the years, and I still have my Vetta 2 head and a Vetta 2 combo with the Armin mod. I won't go into the Armin mod because there's still a bit of information out there if you look online if you're interested. This Vetta 2 head I've had since December 2012, which was a few years after it was discontinued, which meant I paid less than a third of what they originally were. Anderton's found some new old stock and were selling them off for like $4.99, a much more realistic price for this amp. To me, the problem with many Line 6 products, more so from that era, but in my opinion, maybe modelers in general, is less so to do with the gear, but more the user's expectation and perception of what it should sound like. And I know this sounds kind of counterintuitive and almost like I'm missing the point, but when I dial in a tone, I'm not going in with the mindset of this needs to sound exactly like a rectifier and I'm going to A-B them and whatever. I approach building the preset from the perspective of just really wanting a great sounding tone, whether it's clean, high gain or whatever. It doesn't matter that the VH4 model doesn't sound exactly like my diesel, or the 5150 model doesn't match a real one and a frequency spectrum analyzer. I just want a tone that sounds huge, feels good and cuts through live, and with this amp I'm able to get that. And I know it sounds cliche, but the number of times I've had other guitarists at gigs come up to me and ask me how I'm getting my sound or compliment my tone always surprises me. I quite often hear, I've never heard Line 6 gear sound good until tonight. And that's definitely not to brag that I'm a better player or more knowledgeable about tone. More that I've just been really stubborn with the amp and really worked on getting to know the gear, as Phil McKnight would say. It definitely didn't sound too good on its first few outings. And the funny thing is that this amp is now so old and forgotten about. In recent years, I've had guitarists come up to me at gigs thinking it's some kind of new Line 6 product. One of the biggest tonal improvements I found is using a traditional guitar cabinet and just turning the speaker simulation off. The few times that I have seen these things kind of out in the wild, they've been totally lost in the mix. And I think that speaker choice has probably played a large part in that. And they were quite often using the Vetta cabs. I've had really good results just using vintage 30s or GK 100s, and I'm even really happy with it into stock 1968 with the 75 watt speakers. Oh, and another tip, something else I found is that it always sounds best for me to use 2 amps, even the 2 amp models within the amp. Even if the amp settings are identical, it just seems to thicken up and reinforce your sound. For me, the appeal of an all-in-one head unit that people are unlikely to want to steal. You've already got enough to worry about at gigs without babysitting gear or dealing with runs of cable to your amp and then more runs of cable for your effects loop, while setting up on the stage as part of an overcrowded lineup that's already running late. You just don't need that. It's not perfect though. It's got a few things that I find a bit annoying, like the lack of spillover between presets or the tiny gap in sound when switching presets. But that's an issue even with a Helix, unless you're using snapshots instead of presets, because of the way DSP works. If you see one cheap enough, I would definitely recommend picking it up or at least trying it out. But do keep in mind that Line 6 gave up support for these things years ago, and eventually you're probably going to end up with a 20 kilo paperweight. But I love my Vetta and it's here to stay. The cab sims are outdated now, but if you grab one of these Impulse IR loaders from TC Electronic, you can use all your modern IRs with this kind of prehistoric tech, and I love that. I made a video all about this that you can find just here. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. And please subscribe.